indeed a revolution has started. And in many corners, there is definitely, even in the power companies, and I know the power industry quite well, there is some sort of rethinking that reminds me to a big extent to deregulation. We have the same negative attitude from the industry, but after a while they realize that there are also possibilities. And I think at least I see that sort of tendencies. But on the other hand, we must realize that it's a revolution by evolution. It will take some time, and it will be stepwise. So, but still, 39 years from now, we should be 80 to 95% carbon-free in Europe compared to 1990. And for power, the difference will come much earlier. Last year, my organization, the European Climate Foundation, published a roadmap study looking into what 2050 reductions really mean. And first of all, I think it's important to, the most important conclusion really was that it's feasible from a technical point of view. It's really feasible to reduce emissions to that amount, at least 80% for the general economy. But that at the same time means that electricity will have to go carbon-free, more or less. Perhaps the last percentage can be discussed or handled by sinks. But electricity is an important tool for bringing down emissions. So it also means that we will have to see another wave of electrification in Europe. Electricity will take over other markets. It's also interesting to see that the cost per household is not much. It's even, you can even say that it can be lower. To a very big extent, the costs depend on how the policies are applied. When they are applied, how they are applied, the interplay between policies and markets. I think that is the biggest part of the cost for this sort of change. But on a household level, the calculations we made show that 2050, the cost can be probably lower for households. But what needs to happen is an enormous investment wave. Capital expenditure will have to be doubled if we start early. If we start late, 10 years later, it will even be more, perhaps up 200%. So it's to a very big extent both efficiency, renewables, biofuels, whatever, it's about investments. And that also means that we will see a lot of effects on the economy. On the other hand, you can say that the total effect on the economy is quite limited. And of course, it's very hard to judge in that time perspective. But there are really nothing saying that we couldn't be a winner. Europe can be a winner in many respects by being in the forefront and driving this sort of development. I think it's important to also to understand that it's not just about generation and energy sources. It's to a very big extent about infrastructure, because how we can use renewables, and I think it will be, infrastructure will be more and more critical when the volume grows. And the interplay between the member states will also be more and more critical. I think we can say we are still in the starting phase of the revolution. The 20-20-20 goals are an important start-up. But when we reach levels 40, 60, 80%, perhaps there are ideas about up to 100%, but 80 is not totally unrealistic. That we at least know. We need to have much stronger cooperation between the member states, for it will be very hard to do on a member state level. So we have to use the European tools. And that is one of the strengths in Europe, that we have developed a way to cooperate through the European institutions. And they will grow more and more.
I'm on the Climate Change and Energy Waste Energy Working Group of the Committee 1 of the regions. I am based in Hampshire at Hampshire County Council, where I'm the executive member for the environment. And I will touch on our sort of regional aspect of these problems that we're discussing here today. But firstly, let me just say that the AER, the Assembly of European Regions, believes that the regions have a very large role to play in delivering the policies that we're talking about, because we are actually the only interface between government and the citizen. Many regions have an economy and a scale that enables them to play a very significant role. In Hampshire, where where I'm based, the economy, the GDP of that area, for example, is the largest in the UK outside of the Greater London area. And we have considerable experience in past investment in infrastructure. For example, we invested some £200 million over the last decade or so in today's money in producing sustainable energy from waste through our 3 energy from waste plants. And the next stage of our process, to perhaps answer the question put to me, is to progress with renewable energy, both on the large scale of the type of infrastructure investment which might require £35 million, as well as on the micro scale through our 570 schools that are under our control. The approach, we believe, would be to create trading units, sometimes in partnership with private companies. So, for example, we would look to large-scale PV solar power on the rooftops of about 4,000 public buildings, which we have throughout Hampshire, some 150,000 square metres, in fact, of roof space, which is potentially available to us. And, of course, Hampshire, unlike, say, Scotland, for those of you who know the UK, is blessed with much sun throughout the year because we're very far south. I hope there aren't any Scots in the room. I didn't mean to. But they have the advantage of the offshore wind, probably as well as the offshore oil, and there could be a conflict of interest. But the outcomes for a region such as ours would include providing employment in the green economy. We know that even just in the wind technology field, for example, in the UK, there are something like 4,000 new jobs. True, about 1,000 of those are onshore and about 3,000 are offshore, but that gives you an idea of what we would be looking for. Secondly, we'd probably get security of energy at sustainable prices, looking ahead to what we foresee to be quite a volatile energy market for us in the south of the United Kingdom. The capital investment which we make, and I take the comments which were made about what finance houses would be looking for, need to be measured against the financial return, in our case, in cost savings arising from lower energy bills, because we are large consumers of energy ourselves with 100-odd thousand streetlights, for example, plus the income which we would get from the feed-in tariffs in the UK, which I think very shortly are probably going to be reduced because they are quite generous at the moment. And the supply system, of course, is that we have to supply then to the national grid. We would be giving our excess electricity to them, other than that which we're using. The national grid in itself has been privatised for some years in the UK. There are distinct pricing problems because I believe, like one of the previous speakers says, that we have an oligopoly there that effectively means that when prices went up just before winter for the consumer from one supplier, they were suddenly stepped up all round within a matter of weeks by the other suppliers. And although there's freedom in the market in that a consumer can switch from one to the other, in the long run it actually makes no difference. The average price is very much the same for the consumer. And the other part of that problem, and I do take the points that were made by earlier speakers on this, is that through our experience on the energy from waste plant, where with our partners Veolia, we were supplying electricity to the national grid, on the one hand, while on the other hand, we were buying electricity for our street lights and our traffic lights and so on. The differential was about 55% to 100%. That is to say, we were receiving for every £100, sorry, for every £55 we were receiving, we were paying £100 out. Now, in marketing terms, we would call that a bid-offer spread, and that bid-offer spread, to my mind, at that rate is just ridiculous. And it seems to me that one of the things we would be needing to look at, and I have written to our regulator called Ofgem in the United Kingdom about this, on, in fact, the advice of our Secretary of State for Energy, suggesting that what we need to do to provide some certainty of price for us for our long-term investments is to moderate the difference between the buying and selling price through the grid system. And that might be something that the European Union at Commission level might want to look at. So we wouldn't, I certainly believe in free markets. I would do coming from the UK. But what I'm suggesting is that the free market should have a control mechanism which very simply says that if you're going to charge me X for electricity, I should be paying X, you should be paying me X minus a constant ratio for the electricity that I'm supplying back to you. And we need to calculate what that ratio is, which gives the electricity suppliers a fair rate of return, while at the same time enhancing the green technologies and the arrangements we want to make.
We are supplying the renewables, whether it's wind, solar, and others. And for us, just to give the example, when we started in wind, when we got into the wind business back in 2002, till date we have spent almost $1 billion just investing in the technology. Without having a clear market, a sizable market, without having clarity on policy, we would not be investing that kind of money. So I think the first point I would make is that from GE, I think we are continually investing in technology. We've been investing in technology for the last 130 years, and we will continue to do so as long as there's long-term policy certainty, especially associated with renewables. I think the key challenge for us today as a company is we're looking at renewables in the offshore wind space. So we are looking at making a sizable investment in the UK in order to capitalize on the opportunity. Recently, the UK has announced that their recent energy market reforms, which they have some new ideas in terms of how they would provide the subsidy or a different mechanism other than the ROC mechanism. And for example, that's one that I go back to your point earlier, causes some question marks, I think, in terms of the eyes of investors or customers that want to buy our technology in terms of the long-term viability, or at least the certainty on the subsidy scheme. So that's one example which is obviously of concern to us. But having said that, I think for us, we are very much looking at technology being reliable, cost-effective, and most definitely affordable. And that's what we would like to do with offshore. We've done it. I think the industry has seen a step change in the onshore technology in terms of doing that. So we would like to do that. The other point I'd like to make as well, going back to offshore specifically, and why it's important to work with the regions, is because we have to face into the practical realities of what it takes to make these investments. So, for example, when we started looking at setting up a manufacturing facility in the UK, we were faced with the reality of what is the current port infrastructure, as one example, and whether that was adequate for us to have a facility. But I think working with the regions, that's something that we can address, and without obviously funding as well from the regions in order to upgrade that port infrastructure, we would not be able to invest. From an infrastructure perspective as well, I think we recognize that the regions have a very important role to play